Log on, tune in, find out. Another good idea from Cambridge.
Well, it's a great honour and pleasure to have a chance to talk to Sir Frank Kermode, Kermode, to get it pronounced, who we passed in the combination room for 20 years without having a conversation, but now we have a chance to do so. May I call you Frank? Is that
okay?
Yeah.
Anything but Kermode.
Okay. Frank, tell me when and where you were born.
I was born in Douglas, the Isle of Man, in 1919, and I went to school there.
Tell me something about if you want to, about your parents or grandparents or the family.
I don't know a great deal about it. My mother's family was totally obscure. I never met any of them. My father's father died young, in his 20s, and his mother died when I was very small, 2 or 3, so I never knew a grandparent, and I had no brothers or sisters for a good long time. My sister was born when I was 12, so of course I was not very close to her, as I went away when she was 5. And then the war came, and so I didn't go back really. So I really didn't have a family in a curious kind of way.
Well, parents.
I had parents.
You can't disown them yet, anyway. You may tell me why you did disown them, but sometimes parents either directly or indirectly affect one's life. Can you tell me something about your mother and father?
Yes, my mother was a farm girl, a village quite near Douglas called Quegg, which we would go for a walk and she would point out the village, but she would not actually approach it. She didn't want to go back to it. My father's family, which I know only by hearsay, his father was an organist, I imagine a spare time organist. Anyway, he died, I think, 28 or something like that. There was some kind of Welsh connection. There was some sea captain called Pritchard, which was my father's name was John Pritchard, Kermode, and he valued this connection with the bearded Welsh.
That's Pritchard with CH. Yeah.
Though of course I never met the great seafarer. My father we were an unlucky family in this respect, that he was exactly the right age to be called up when conscription came in 1915, was it? And I was the right age to be called up in 1939. So in fact, we both had, our youths were deeply affected by the 2 wars. And I think I always rather resented that. There was no point in resenting it, but I did. Now, what else can I tell you about him? He had a rather romantic George Gissing-like story, because while he was away in France during the First World War, his mother, who of course had been widowed, remarried. They had a shop, which we would now call an off-license, I think, kind of general store. And the man she married staged a robbery at the shop, stole the stock, and of course he went bankrupt. So he returned from France with no shop and no money and so on. Took temporary jobs, and then got what he thought was a job that would just see him through as a storekeeper, and he stayed in that for the rest of his career. He retired after the Second World War, can't remember exactly when, and it was a sad time because my mother had dementia, and he was extreme diabetic, so he in fact died of it, I think, living in a sort of home for old men, although he was only about 70. And they had a stronger connection with my sister, of course, since she still lived there, than with me. So the Isle of Man is my home territory, and I sometimes feel quite strongly about it, but not often. and so, well, I find that when I go there, I don't know whether other people ever feel this about their birthplaces. As soon as I get off the boat or the plane when I go there, I feel depressed. And I'm always glad to get out of this.
Quite a lot of people feel that.
I'm very unkind to my sister, who's an extremely nice person. Well,
were either of your parents interested in books and reading? And
not really, no. My father, I'm sure, never read a book in his life. My mother had a kind of interest in poems. There's a Manx poet whom I bet you've never heard. His name was T.E. Brown. He was a friend of Quillicooch. He was a master at Clifton. But he was a Manxman, and he's great still, or perhaps I don't know now. I don't think there are many Manx people left in the Isle of Man, but I remember the 50th, or was it the 100th anniversary of the birth of Brown, when there was a tremendous do in the town, and the speaker on that occasion was Quillicooch. So he was thought quite seriously of. He's not totally forgotten. The reason he's forgotten is that all his good poems, or fairly good poems, are in Manx dialect. And nobody understands that since my mother died. So no, we can't. She recites some passages of Brown's poems to me when I was young. I still remember some of them, but it's rare now to come across anybody, even specialists who've even heard of T. Brown. So I don't go around reciting.
I don't feel so ashamed at not knowing about him. Tell me about your schools. I mean, the ones that you remember. Your
schools. Well, the routine for a boy. Remember, I was at school in the 30s when everybody was very poor, and my early schools, infant schools, and so on, you could tell the difference between those of us whose parents had enough to live on and those of us who didn't, because those of us who didn't wore clogs. They were issued by the town.
Clogs?
Clogs.
Did you wear clogs?
Well, I didn't wear clogs. I was upper class. You could tell. I remember that when they ran wearing clogs, sparks would come from behind. It was very impressive. But I belonged to the leather wearing classes, and there was a real distinction in the two. I went through the usual things to the grammar school, Douglas High School it was called, now comprehensive of course. And it was a good school in the sense that you might have thought that its curriculum had very little to do with the kind of life that people led in the Isle of Man. It had a lot to do with getting places in universities. And the teachers, I think, or some of them, well, most of them rather limited now by hindsight. But on the other hand, they were quite good at getting people through exams.
They were Oxbridge types, or?
Nobody went to Oxbridge because they couldn't afford it. There were no scholarships that were open to.
And none of the teachers had been to Oxford?
And most of them, I think, had been to the old Victoria University, Leeds, Liverpool, Manchester, around about there. Some of them were ex-servicemen, some of them lacked an arm and that kind of thing. Some of them, I think, by hindsight, were suffering from sort of traumatic post.
Sounds like Evelyn Waugh to me.
Yes. Anyway, there was quite a bit of competition. Nobody, not quite nobody, one or two boys whom I knew had parents who could support them at Oxford, Cambridge. But mine certainly couldn't. I won a scholarship. There were three, I think, and I won the best of them, but the best of them was tied to Liverpool University, so I went there.
Were there any, just on your school, two things that often are revealing, was there any teacher you remember who did inspire you in any way or have any effect on you?
Yes, but in a very slight way, I think. I remember a teacher called Pendlebury who was in fact waspishly bad-tempered, but in fact obviously did like poems and liked you for liking them. There was a very romantic young French teacher who used to croon Lamartine. There was a certain amount of savagery in the teaching. We all got beaten.
Really?
With great frequency. You got beaten for not doing things, or for doing things. One way or the other, you got caught. Anyway, they did their job, I suppose, although they might have been hard put to explain the relationship between what they did and what became of the candidates later.
And what sort of subjects were you, by that time, were you showing any particular interest in literature or? Yes,
I was. I had lots of time. They didn't know quite what to do with that. I was more than a year ahead of the class that I was in, which is a thing I would never have allowed if I'd known what it entailed. There's a big difference between 16 and 17 and a half, I think. Consequently, I've sort of finished with school far too early. I mean, I'd done what they were there to provide, so they didn't know what to do with me for a year and a half or so. That's a regrettable thing. I needed some help at that point. The school did not have a good library. It didn't have teachers who had the kind of time. They were very generous with their time in things like sports and music and so on, but they didn't want to buckle down and teach you Greek if that's what you wanted to do. You could do that, but it was done very half-heartedly. So in a way, I should have had a year luxuriating in a wide field of study, but I didn't. I just sort of went through the routines again for another year, trying to add other things. I tried to add Greek. I had decent Latin, and good English, and fairly good French. So I think it wasn't too bad.
Do you remember any books that particularly,
any books
at that time, were any books that you particularly enjoyed or influenced you or excited you?
Independently of school?
Yes, or independently or at school.
I suppose so. I was reading books which you'd expect a literate boy of 17 to admire, like Graham Greene, but I wasn't particularly devoting myself to the classics. But reading a lot, yes, yeah. Spurts of enthusiasm, leading a good life, really. I had a good friend who didn't survive. Bicycles and beautiful countryside, and all that was very enjoyable. And books, of course, which you both read and discussed. And so, he went to Oxford, actually, and was in the 8th Army. So we kept in touch. He was important to me, but he died in his 50s. And,
What was his name?
Quayle.
Quayle.
Anyway, then, can I pass on to Liverpool?
Last question about school. I mean, hobbies, sport, music,
Sport,
cycling.
very keen on sport and music without being very adept at either. I played football and got into a very poor school team.
As a goalkeeper?
No. I was left half, as we used to call them.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Like Billy Wright.
Exactly. A parallel that no doubt occurred to me. Anyway, I took part in things like that and played cricket. We weren't well equipped. We were a very poor school. We had muddy playground field, really it was. Volunteer refereeing, of course, from the teachers who wished they were at home, umpiring.
Yes.
So it fell rather far short of the best public school standards.
And music you mentioned, and may come up later, but has music been important through your life?
Very, absolutely centrally, yes. Not as an executant, which I'm not good at. I did try to play the clarinet and the violin, but badly. You know, even I could tell it was bad. But certainly the interest has been absolutely central.
What particularly? I mean, which composers, which periods?
Well, I suppose in the early days, when I remember there was a gramophone at home, but my father's records would be of the kind of when father papered the parlour, that kind of comic song. And I acquired some records purely at random, as far as I could see. So I became quite a fan of Elizabeth Schumann, not Schwarzkopf, but Schumann. And there were all sorts of things I knew at random. I had no structured knowledge of music at that time. But the records, some of which my sister still got, I think, were interesting. In fact, some of them are kind of museum pieces now. And then it was only when I got to university that I began to be instructed in these things. I became a kind of assistant at the Liverpool Philharmonic Hall, either selling programs or conducting people to their places. So I got to hear all the concerts for nothing, and there were 2 a week in the season. So I got to know the repertoire, a sketch of the repertoire anyway, and I followed that up. I did really know quite a lot about some things. There's an awful lot of music. I can't claim to know. And one has one's favourites, which would certainly include the Mozart operas, for example, Beethoven, certainly, Schubert, certainly. So the focus is in Viennese period, I suppose. It's a little more adventurous than that.
Does it connect with your work at all in the sense that you listen to it when you're writing, or?
No, I used to do that. I find I can't do it now. I haven't got that double attention, that you, or inattention, perhaps you'd have to call it.
Mm.
No. Right.
Because some writers actually write with music going through their mind. Maitland, for instance, used to...
Sorry?
Maitland, F.W. Maitland, the historian,
Yeah.
was a fan of Wagner, but also other music, and people have analysed his writing to show that it actually has the rhythms and movements of classical composers concealed in it.
You write the Liebestod
Yes.
as you're writing about the law, or whatever it was making.
It sounds odd, but there it is. Okay, well, let's go on then to university. You went to Liverpool to read English, presumably, did you?
There, I think, although I suppose the truth would be that if I could have gone to Oxford or Cambridge, I would have done. I don't feel very short-changed about that, because it was a very conscientious job they did at Liverpool. And with good people, good representative people, including the necessary Leavisite. So we were given some idea of what the subject was about. And also a lot of hard philology, which is sort of dropped out. People here don't on their own do much of it. But we had severe Anglo-Saxon Middle English courses. And we had also to learn a new language during that period. So that's where I began Italian, which I kept up. So I think that was a good 3 years. Again, the old saying is you learn probably as much or more from the best of your friends on these occasions. And I think that was the case with me. As a kind of inspiration in what it meant to be a truly literate person, I think my example would have been another undergraduate rather than the teachers. The whole period was somewhat overshadowed by the war.
This is the late 30s now.
Yes, I went up in 1937 and I was in the Navy by 1940. They'd given me, they could have called me up earlier, but they gave me a year because I'd done 2 years of the degree course. You were allowed to finish it. How I found myself in the Navy is kind of completely comprehensive mystery.
Liverpool's near the water, I suppose.
That's right. Well, in fact, the mechanics of it was rather odd, because I had summer jobs. One of the summer jobs I had was as a purser on one of the ferries that went to Liverpool or Ardrossan or Belfast and so on. It was a very kind of enjoyable job, summer job. And the ship in which I was serving was, of course, commandeered at once by the Navy, and because they needed people to sail these things, they just commandeered the crews as well. So I got forcibly entered into there and given an emergency commission. I remember talking to Alan Ross, who was, of course, a war hero in what do they call these fast motorboats? He won the DSO and all this. Being amazed to know that I had actually received a commission without having had any training whatsoever or any time on the lower deck. And it was entirely a freak of that sort. It made me an utterly useless acquisition for the Navy for a long time, for quite a long time. However, I had nearly 6 years there, so really. Where were we?
Well, yes, let's just go back to the university. Sometimes there is, again, someone whose lectures or supervisions or whatever affects one later on in one's life at the first time at university. I was wondering whether you remember any of the teachers who...
Yes, I do. The part of the course which is the best test really of literary ability, is one borrowed from Cambridge, namely what do they call it here? It's the one where you're confronted with I. Richard's test, so to speak. Confronted with passages, you're asked certain things about the period of the language, what time.
Gobbets, were they? Or that was at Oxford?
Gobbets is the slang term for it.
Yes.
It
Unseen.
has a posher term.
Yeah.
Yes. It's been in my life for 60 years, I also know what it is, but I can't remember. Anyway, these are the lapses of memory that you mentioned. And there, I think you did see a side of the teachers which is not merely routine. Obviously, they could lecture on Wordsworth or whatever, but when they showed you how to deal with a piece of raw data of this kind, they did expose their own sensibilities, which and that was good. There's a move now to do away with. There's always a move to do away with things, isn't there? Here, some people dislike that. There's a compulsory paper and tripos still here on those lines.
Too hard, too stressful.
Yeah,
They're trying to do that with school children who are learning languages to try and get rid of the oral part of it.
I couldn't believe that.
It's amazing, isn't it? Too stressful. So this is too stressful.
Well, they'd abolish the schools.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, so that was a good test. So I do remember one or two actual episodes. I remember a man called Arthur Humphreys who was very young. He'd had...
Is that with a Y? Humphreys with a Y?
E-Y, I think.
Yes.
He had been a Commonwealth Fellow at Harvard. He came to, as a very young man, very earnest. He later became a professor at Leicester, and he was not thought to be of the top rank, but he certainly impressed me on one or two occasions there. I remember one particular poem of Yeats, which we tore apart.
Which one? I'm a fan of Yeats, I say.
You're a fan of Yeats?
He's my favourite 20th century poet. Yes.
Well, you will certainly know the poem, Suddenly I Saw the Cold and Rook Delighting.
Oh yes, of course. Every time I see rooks, I think of it.
Yeah, it's a wonderful poem, technically superb too. Anyway, we once spent an hour together on that, and I remember thinking I'm never so impressed by a piece of teaching.
Right, so you were impressed by this man's teaching.
I remember that episode, somehow popped into my head as we were speaking, as it does from time to time. And it is an admirable poem.
Well, for me, they're all admirable, so it's just a degree of admirableness. I even got a little tree in my garden, planted from the wood where he used to go, and unfortunately I thought it was a hazelnut, because one of my favourite poems is Song of Wandering Angus, and so I thought it was the hazelnut that he mentions in that. But my wife rather amusedly pointed out that this tree, which had been carefully brought to me, turns out to be a beech tree, a beech nut. But there we are. It's Yeats's tree all the same.
Well, he was inaccurate about things.
Good. That's comforting.
You couldn't find the Lake Isle of Innisfree road.
No, I went to look for it, and I was quite surprised not to find it there. You mentioned you learnt a lot from your contemporaries. Were there any who went on to be academics, or?
Yes, there was one. The most impressive, in fact, the most impressive student of that age that I had ever come across was a man called Peter Ewer, who was a conscientious objector and spent time in prison during the war. He wrote a book on Yeats while in prison, I think the first serious study I gave called Towards the Mythology. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
No.
Published
Your URE.
URE, published in 1946. When he was, I think, still in jail. He gave up actually. He didn't hold out for the whole war. He had 2 sentences. And then he joined. You see, he refused the kind of auxiliary services that you could adopt if you didn't want to be. Until he served his time, and then he joined UNRWA. And he had an amazing career in Greece because he rapidly learned modern Greek. He had good Greek, and he became head of UNRWA for the whole of Greece.
That's the United Nations
Relief and something. I remember him. He was very good too. When I was away during the war, I was in Iceland for 2 years. He would send me a book a month. He was my book a month club. And the books that he sent were quite testaments to the taste of serious young men in his time. There were things like Virginia Woolf Between the Acts, Gordon Letters from Iceland, which as he knew I was in Iceland, which he shouldn't have known. And there's a rather distinctive array of classy books that he said. Anyway, later he and I were appointed at the same moment actually to lectureships at Newcastle. And I didn't stay there very long, but he did. He stayed there the rest of his life and was head of his department. The rest of his life, unfortunately, was not very long. He died at 50. And he was in some ways, given his age, I think he had achieved more than anybody else in the profession. He had a good start at Liverpool too.
Good. Well, you mentioned Iceland and the war. Is there anything else, any memories of the war and your notable contribution to it? It sounds like Spike Milligan and the war and how I won it. But were there any things about the war that, apart from reading, having a chance to read books?
Well, I had lots of time for reading. That's true. And curious enough, I watched a program on television last night about kamikaze.
Oh yes, I've recorded it. I haven't seen it yet.
Well, it's. I had a special interest in it because I was there. You see, I was never actually under attack like kamikazes.
But you were in the Pacific, were you?
Yes, I was there. In fact, after when the European War was obviously nearly over, I was in an aircraft carrier which was sent out to join them. They didn't, as the man rather cruelly points out in the documentary, they didn't need us, the Americans. But still, it seemed appropriate that we should turn up for the return of Singapore. And so on. In fact, the fleet, the British fleet which went to the Pacific was huge. It was only in relation to the American fleet, which was enormous. And they took the Americans took the brunt of the suicide attacks, which we didn't. We were kind of, I don't know how strong your Japanese geography is, but they had to take Okinawa.
Yes. Yes, I know where Okinawa.
But do you know where Sakashima is?
Yes. There have been films about that.
What's that?
I think there have been some recent films about that taking of it. Yeah.
Sakashima was our. We were supposed to keep that tidy. Well, but the Americans took all the. But it was very interesting to see this recreation of it. In fact, it kept me awake last night because I hadn't revisualized it for so many years. I really had some difficulty in explaining to myself why I was there at the time. So,
Did you encounter the Japanese at all in the war or after?
Only at the end of it, yes. At the end of it. We went to Hong Kong, which of course got occupied, to take off people from the prison camps. It was an extraordinary experience, which, because I was put in charge of this operation. The camps were mixed. The Ballard's book is about Shanghai, actually, but it's very similar.
Yes, I've read that.
To the Hong Kong. And so, of course, there were lots of very young children born in the camps, and therefore not more than 4 years old, probably. So I had this extraordinary gang of men, women, and children to look after at the end of the war. I had Japanese working parties, so I did have some dealing with Japanese through the NCOs. So, we've skipped ahead, but that is quite an interesting little bit of my story. I think an aircraft carrier, the aircraft carrier that I was in was not a fleet carrier, it was a smallish one, but still quite a big ship. And we had to find space not only for a full crew, but for all these people, men, women and children. And we had to find, and that was the real headache, we had to find water for them. We had people at the showers with stopwatches, 30 seconds in the shower, like that. And they were all really ex-civil servants or business people who'd been caught in Hong Kong at the beginning of the war. They were all suffering from beriberi. They were all miserable, and they all expected what they couldn't get, as say, home comforts.
Showers, long showers.
And by the time we got to Sydney, which is quite a long trip, there was a lot of discontent to deal with, and perhaps I was not all good, or perhaps not very good at dealing with it, I can't remember. But anyway, by the time they left the ship at Sydney, they were all pretty bad temper, and so was I. I was so glad to see the back of them all. Certain colonial habits reasserted themselves when they got into a British atmosphere. They demanded so much, quite extraordinary. I was trying to explain to them that our sailors were going without showers in order that they should have them, but they still wanted more. So I was given an insight into aspects of the colonial character.
You say you jumped ahead. Is that because there are other things about the earlier part of the war that you remember?
You put me in mind as I started talking about the
kamikaze and
kamikaze. Well, I know that the early part of the war was the 2 years in Iceland, which was a very different experience. We were trying to lay a boom across a very beautiful fjord, which had a gap of maybe 1.5, 2 miles. So it seemed a reasonable proposition to put a boom across in order to give the ships which came into the harbour, including the Russian convoys and so on, give them a peaceful night or two, because it's free of submarines and so on. And we were supposed to be good at this boom laying business.
But you weren't.
Well, we were completely unequal to the conditions. We had. What was I doing in this? Anyway, we were a depot ship containing thousands of tons of metal in various forms, which we were going to. Well, you have an idea what a boom.
Oh yes.
Yeah. But it has a gate. It's the gate is the complicated bit. And every time we got it nearly down, there would be a hurricane come down the field and blow it all away. And we had to wait for another boom to come up from Glasgow, which would take about 3 months probably. But, meanwhile, we had nothing to do. Nothing to do.
Except read the monthly books.
We got 48 hours leave every 2 months, which you could go to Reykjavik. Reykjavik was an extremely dull town, but there was an English bookshop which specialised in the old Everyman Library type. So I've still got sort of rows of Dostoevsky and that sort of red binding, that kind of thing. But that's what kept on sane, I think. It really was. 2 years is pretty dreadful. People did go crazy, actually. Our men there was no leave from Iceland, not even compassionate leave. So I remember a man from Hull whose wife and children had been killed, and he wasn't allowed to go home. So a lot of misery about that. All you could do, you could fish. You just throw a line over the side and pull it back with a fish on the end. No, Iceland has not tempted me. I was asked to a big celebration in the Isle of Man. They have a ceremony called Tynwald ceremony on July the 5th, which is where the laws are read in Manx and so on. And there's a sort of procession to this artificial hill in the middle of the island, and they invite the prime ministers or the deputies come, not the prime ministers, to this annual thing. And they asked some fairly well-known natives like me to come and join the party. I found myself, I had a very good time actually, because I sat at dinner with Mary Robinson, who was delightful. But I also sat beside the Deputy Prime Minister of Iceland and told him of my years in his bailiwick. He said, well, would you like to come back? And I said, well, I think. He said, no, not even politely. Yes, anyway, that was the first half of the war, more or less, with Iceland. The second half was the Pacific.
Should we move on beyond the war? Is
Yes.
that okay? You came back. Did you do a PhD or?
I started one. I never actually finished it. I got a job, and that seemed to be why we wanted a PhD in the first place.
This was the one at Newcastle, was it?
Yes.
Yeah. And when was that? 1947.
47. I was extremely ill-equipped for it because I hadn't done any serious work for nearly 6 years. We were given tremendous load of teaching. People say they're very overworked now. I can't understand them really. If they get overworked, they get 3 years off, don't they?
Yes.
There we would have John Butt
Yes.
was my boss, and a wonderful example of someone who knows how to work, and is really steady, the grind, and did it far more than his share of the teaching and so on. But I was landed, for example, with the Shakespeare course, and so limited was the accommodation that you had to give the lectures twice over. And that meant you were giving a lecture a day pretty well. Apart from, and John Butt would say in his gentle way, some of these students, lots of them of course would come out of the army, they were 27 years old, and they all wanted to be processed quickly so that they could get jobs. He said they come and say that they keep hearing about I. Richards, but they don't know anything about Richards, and they want to know. And if they want to know, we must tell them.
Mm.
So he said, "Will you give a course of lectures on high written?" So it was with a 2 days notice. But you did that kind of thing. Everybody worked extremely hard. But you remember, perhaps not. You remember the conditions in 1947.
No, I just came back to England in '47 from India, and I was only 6 or something like that. So it was. I remember the cold and misery of Oxford in 1947. But
cold and half-starved. It was horrible. Newcastle seemed to me a particularly awful place. This is very unfair. It's a rather beautiful place. Anyway, I was offered this. I'd had a very good supervisor. I'd gone immediately back to Liverpool when I got demobbed because I had no money and I had a graduate fellowship at Liverpool. So, the man who looked after me happened to be the only absolutely top-class scholar that I worked with, a man called Gordon, who was a
what was his first name?
Donald J.
D.J. Gordon.
He was a brilliant career that broke up on alcohol. Disagreeable man in many ways, but he certainly...
Is he dead?
He died.
Yes.
He's safe.
He's safe to talk about.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot about him in the autobiography. If you ever get around having a look at that, I'll see if I can find you a copy.
I'd love to have that. You can put a plug for it. Your autobiography is, I was told last night, and I've seen it, but I've forgotten it. It has a clever title, I was told.
It's called Not Entitled.
Not Entitled, that's right.
It's partly about a prevailing sense of not being entitled that I've always had.
But so you started the PhD with Gordon, and then on what was the subject?
Well, he was a Renaissance scholar, and that was what I wanted to be. I wasn't, I think, perfectly equipped for the job, but I began studying this to show you this rather on the recondite side, I suppose, but the poet Cowley, who flourished around about the time of the Restoration.
Abraham Cowley, yes.
Abraham Cowley.
Yes.
He wrote a part of an epic poem called the Davideus, and it's adorned by thousands of notes. It's trying to meet the requirement that epic should be instructive in a universal kind of way. So with this tremendous learning packed in the notes, and my task really was to find out where he got it all from. It's rather disappointing that most of it was taken from popular encyclopedia, as if he looked it all up on the internet. However, it gave me sort of familiarity. Working on his work gave me a lot of familiarity with books I never would have come across otherwise. Treatises on marriage in the early 16th century, that kind of thing. So I enjoyed all that very much.
Did you do? I mean, your work is very erudite and also has notes and cross-references. Did you develop any particular system of annotations, or do you just take notes from books as you read them, or do you put them on cards, or do you have any?
I'm very unsystematic, I'm afraid. I do take notes. I don't take them carefully enough. So I sometimes find when I look back at my notes, I don't know which book they came from. And I often thought, I really must change my life in that respect, but it's too late now.
You took them longhand with a pen, presumably, for a long time, and then with a typewriter, maybe?
Yeah, yes, typewriter. Most of the time. Well, no, I still do it with a pen or pencil.
And how do you find what you're looking for? I mean, are they indexed in any way or arranged in folders?
Oh,
or?
goodness me, no.
No.
They're arranged in heaps.
Ah.
And well, curious enough that these American colleges which try to buy your thing, they rather like it. They like them to be messy, so they give some of the work sorting them out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are they going to America? You wonder?
Some have already gone.
Some have gone.
Yeah.
And do you have a big library, or did you have a big library?
I had a big library, but of course it met catastrophe, which you probably, it was all the local papers, but you don't do the local thing.
No.
When I moved house, I lived in Luard Road.
Yes.
And then I was divorced. I was living alone there, and so I decided to move. I moved to where I am in Pinehurst. But the 2,000 of my books were destroyed in transit from Luard Road to Pinehurst by a mix-up between the city removal, the city garbage people, and the removers. Their boxes mixed up, and they ground the best part of my library to pieces.
How extraordinary! It sounds like Borges or something. Too improbable to be true. How extraordinary!
I wouldn't have had any room for them now. I think if I'd. But, however, they were the best of my books. They happened in the room where I kept the best books.
What year was this? When was this?
Sorry?
When did this happen?
11 years ago. It began, the insurance company was generous, I thought. They gave me quite a lot of money. So I went out with the notion of replacing at least some of them, but I gave that up.
Did you have a list or know what they were?
I had a not complete list, yes, but this just opened up an appalling prospect of what was gone and what was irreplaceable. Annotated things.
Yes, I was going to say.
Things with important inscriptions and so on. Also manuscript material which people, important people had sent me. All that was lost. You get over it awfully quickly. I remember sitting outside the house in Luard Road thinking, this is the worst day of my life. But quite soon thinking, I can all sorts of think of all sorts of things much worse than this that could have happened.
You didn't get a sense of sort of relief. I mean, that I sometimes, when I'm now beginning to throw away papers, which I thought I'd have to keep, I get a sense of freedom, that I can do now, rethink, or do not be trammeled by too much data, so to speak, or too many memories.
No, I didn't think that. I didn't think so. I really genuinely had that sort of rather banal thought that suppose, I sit here crying over the loss of some books, and I think, what would I do if my daughter was dead, or something like that. That would be a serious cause for grief. Not this.
Yes, well, that was very philosophical.
Yeah.
Well, we got to that by way of your PhD, and now you're teaching at Newcastle. You said you weren't there very long, though.
No, I was there for 2 years, and then I went. The man I was speaking of, who supervised me briefly, it happens in Liverpool, went to Reading, which is a very tiny department where he had a lot of power, so he more or less summoned me to Reading. I was very glad to. Glad to join. I had a very good time. I enjoyed Reading very much. It's something that you ought to get in small Cambridge colleges, I suppose. A very tiny unit of people with many common interests, which they were willing to share. So,
across disciplines, you mean, or within?
Well, within
English.
the breadth of
Which
of
job?
the various disciplines that come under the heading of English. Yes. Yeah. Or Italian, or with a Renaissance base, as it were. Good medievalist, Joe Trapp, who became the director of the Warburg Institute, now dead. Gordon is also dead. In fact, everybody's dead except me.
How long were you there?
I was there for 8 years, and then I went to Manchester.
So that's between about 1950
58, yeah.
58. You were already beginning to, I mean, you have written many books. I'm very impressed by how much, and particularly large number in the 60s and 70s, I think.
Did I?
You can't remember.
I do know that my best books were written in that period.
Do you enjoy writing?
I do, and once I get going, I find it very difficult to start something. Starting a book seems an impossible thing to do. Even starting a review, I'll find all kinds of things to do around the house before I begin.
My favourite line, of course, is "All things can tempt me from the craft of verse," and
Yes.
Likewise, everything can tempt you from sitting down and starting
Yes.
to write. And that blank, empty first page, I always write at the top, "This is rubbish what I'm going to write, and I'll never use it, but let me just put down a few things." And that releases you.
That's the way out of the difficulty that Mallarmé saw in his poem, "Le vide papier que sa blancheur défend." It's the sheer whiteness of it that terrifies you. You get rid of that.
I get rid of it by just writing, "This is a preliminary, unusable bit of thought," and then I just start. And once it's started, it's not so bad. How much do you have, as I say, written or published very many books? Did you set yourself an amount to write a day, or do you?
No.
On a good day, how much did you write?
Enormous variation in that, I think. I remember a book of mine which was important from the point of view of academic success was called Romantic Image, which actually happened. I'd been asked to give a lecture. I was in Reading. I'd been asked to give a lecture on a poem of Yeats, any poem of Yeats, because there was a circus. They didn't call it that. So I gave a lecture on in memory of Major Robert Gregory, and while I was writing the lecture, I saw all sorts of things I wanted to say. So I went, and in the course of a summer vacation, I had written that book. That's never happened to me any other time. And that's just was pure luck, really. That it was like finding oil, striking oil. I don't know why I suddenly developed a cough in your program.
Don't worry. So you wrote 100,000 word book in 2 or 3 months about in that summer.
It wasn't as long as that. It was more like 75, I'd say. Yes,
Longhand or by typewriter? Or?
Typewriter.
Do you still work on a typewriter or a computer?
I work on a computer, yes.
And how many drafts do you of any?
As many as I need. Who can you say? You lose, of course, computer facility of correction on the computer means that lots of drafts are simply abolished before you get there. You don't know how many there have been. I go on changing them to the very last minute. The changing done in proof yesterday.
Are there any conditions which you think helps or encourages your writing? I mean, some people find going for walks, sometimes a small bit of alcohol, sometimes music. Have you ever noticed any things which stimulate you in your writing?
I think silence is the best for me. I've tried music, as we said before. Walk. Well, yes, it shortens the time available for writing. What else can you say? What were the other alternatives?
Alcohol.
Alcohol. Not until you stopped. Not until you stopped.
I found when I was an undergraduate I couldn't start essays, and the only way I could really do it was to have a very small sip of sherry, which somehow just relaxed me a bit, and I could start writing if it was a very difficult essay.
I see. That's not a pharmacological effect.
Let's move on to the next part of your career. You were at Reading until about 58.
Yes, 8 years.
Then what?
I went to Manchester rather reluctantly. If Gordon was a difficult man. When I was invited to the chair at Manchester, I didn't want to go. And if they'd have given me a leadership at Reading, I would have stayed. But they would. He said that a chair at Manchester is one thing, but it doesn't outweigh a lectureship. Anyway, it would help, and I needed more salary actually because I had 2 children.
You were married and had 2 children.
And so I went to Manchester, the big upheaval that entailed, and a rather grim place it was in those days. It isn't now. It was a difficult time from the family point of view because it was before the anti-smoke law came in, and my children who were then, they moved there when they were 2, the twins were 2. They were ill all the time, and finally the doctor said, you're going to have to take them away from this area, because otherwise they're going to have chronic bronchitis. So we started on my trek again, this time to Bristol. And I didn't stay there because I was asked to go to London and so on.
You've travelled around a lot.
Too much, yes.
Restless. Well, it sounds as if you were partly pushed. I mean, you wanted to stay.
I really wanted to stay at Reading, yes. Mind you, it wouldn't have remained exactly as it was in these idyllic times, I think. It enormously expanded for one thing. It was in an old house when I went there, a big old house on the Oxford Road in Reading, where the floors in the upper third were so insecure that you weren't allowed to have more than 2 students at a time.
And 3 books. Well, let's, just for time, let's skip over till Cambridge. Is that all right?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
That was about 1960. When did you come here? That was
74.
74. This was to the Edward the Seventh chair. Do you remember coming here and any impressions when you first came to Cambridge? Did you come to King's straight away, or?
Well, there is that curious sort of begging bowl thing. You go and try to find out which college will have you, or which is entitled to have you, because there's a quota.
Yes.
I think. And King's had its quota. I think I was offered fellowships from Fitzwilliam and Peterhouse. I was strongly advised by Noel Allen to have nothing to do with either of those. In fact, he strongly advised to have nothing to do with Cambridge.
Really? Really?
Yeah.
Gosh.
Because of the bad temper of the English faculty.
Oh yes, already bad-tempered.
Terrible.
To get worse later.
They'd had lawsuits, all sorts of things. anyway, he wanted me to stay in London, and in a way I would have been very happy to do that. But then I was persuaded to do it, and Anne and Leach worked out some way of evading the restrictions on having me at King's. I don't know how they did that. I exceeded the quota. There's something in the statute.
Notwithstanding.
Notwithstanding. Yes. And then I had to take another year at London for some reason. So in fact, it was all settled in 73, but I came in 74.
You mentioned Edmund Leach, and he was provost at that time.
Yes.
And you interviewed him. Did you get to know him at all well?
Well, patchily. He was not awfully easy to get on with, I think.
No, cantankerous.
Sometimes I had a wonderfully good time with him. I remember we were in New York together. It was like being on a student. We had such fun. It wasn't like that normally.
No, other times he was grumpy and...
Yeah. I remember him at electors' fellowships. We sit patiently while many cases were discussed which had very little chance of ultimate success. And then far into the afternoon, he would suddenly explode and insist that people attend to what they were doing and to the likely outcome. But still, you must have served many times on that committee.
Yes, I was on the Fellowship Electors just before that, between 71 and 75, 74.
It's the most interesting committee.
Yes, it was, at that time it's filled with all these Nobel Prize winning Brenners and Reeses and...
I know, well, I remember, one of the things I shall always remember about King is a meeting of the electors where Martin Reeson got onto the list two very brilliant young men who were interested in what he was interested in, and Sydney gave them a terrific grilling. And Martin said, when they'd left, he said, "You weren't interviewing for the Nobel Prize."
Mildly. Yeah, Sydney was pretty savage. And then Dan Mackenzie was also on it here. I was going to, we've skipped on to King's. Were any fellows of King's close friends of yours, or you like to talk about any of them in particular?
No, I think in a sense I suppose I arrived too late in life to make that kind of friendship.
Tony Tanner must have been here then.
Tony Tanner he wasn't actually here when I arrived. He was in America. He had resigned actually. He'd gone to Hopkins and decided immediately that it was a disastrous.
Yeah, so it's typical Tony.
And then he had an illness. The question then was this was a good thing about King's, I think, and I dare say it would be true of other colleges too, but since there was a clear vacancy in the faculty, in fact a vacancy was advertised, it didn't seem unreasonable that he should apply for his own job and get it. The snag was, it was far easier to do that since it was a faculty post being advertised. So far easier to do that than getting back into King's. And Edmund was a bit stiff about that. There really wasn't any certain reason why he shouldn't go back into King's. And there was always this danger of his breaking down and so on. However, it was worked in the end, but in the end, of course, he did break down. Great loss, I think. He was
Yes, he was a charming man, very sweet. Did you know Chris Prendergast at all well? He was...
I don't know him well.
Because he's, sort of literature.
He's never, or very rarely here.
No, well he sort of left quite a long time ago and comes back sometimes, but...
well, he's in Denmark.
Yeah, most of the time. Too close to Iceland for your liking.
Well, I like Denmark actually, because he married someone in Denmark.
Yes, that's right, yes. Had some personal reason for being there. Have you, having been to a lot of Victorian and other universities, what do you think about the Cambridge setup, the college system and the way Cambridge works?
I think it's mad in a way, because it does work, partly because people want it to work, and it is. When I first came here, it seemed to be expected of me that I would do something about the mess that the English faculty did. But of course, I immediately made enemies as a result of trying to do that. It was a total failure, everything I tried, complete failure. And then I saw how many vested interests there were, keeping things exactly as they were. I remember people for whom I have certain respect, like Hugh Sykes Davis, John. This kind of vision of Cambridge, she's admirable in its way. It's like sort of a Platonic academy, teachers walking by the banks of the river. So, and none of this, we discovered, some people who worked with me on this, that there were people there were undergraduates who had been through their 3 years and never been taught directly by a member of the faculty. Well, this is a scandal, I think.
Taught by postgraduates and so on.
When we did a report on it, and reported to the annual faculty meeting, and it was ruled out of order. We didn't want to discuss it. Sort of thing. So there were lots of disappointments like that. I thought it would be a help to Christopher Ricks, whom I admire and have admired ever since he left Oxford.
I hope to interview him too. I was at Worcester when he was there, yes, and some of my best friends were taught by him, so I'd like to.
Well, he's the dazzler in our midst, I think, but a very difficult person. A lovable man in many ways, but extraordinarily difficult.
This is going to go on to the internet. He will forgive you, I'm sure.
Well, I think he would accept that description. I think he'd rather like to be called lovable.
Lovable and difficult. Yeah. But Christopher was egging you on to reform this place, or?
Well, no, I was egging when there was a vacancy. I worked to get him here, which we did. We got him here. And that, of course, was like dropping a match into the powder. After that, there was bitter enmity on both sides. Not what I thought. I knew Ricks well, and I thought we're not so different in our views about things as all that. And if we worked together, we might be able to make some sense of this place. But we couldn't.
You did work together, but you couldn't make sense of it.
We didn't really work together. I think we really got two different parties developed within it, in fact. And the end was really my packing it in. I think I just got so tired of it all, I couldn't do it.
Well, the final events, which I don't know whether you want to talk about, were going on just when I'd been here a few years and I was on the edge of it. I remember signing ballot papers and furious discussions, which I never quite followed, about Colin McCabe. What was that a part of this deeper difficulties, or?
It was very much part of it. It was very complicated, and in brief, McCabe had done his probationary
Mm.
time, and the time had come to say whether he was going to be promoted or not. Rix was violently opposed to him, not without reason, although he and I went to McCabe's lectures
Mm.
and found great improvements in them, so, and he implicitly even admitted this, but he just didn't like McCabe.
Mm.
A lot of people didn't. I didn't particularly like him myself,
Mm.
but I didn't think he ought to be treated in this way. Anyway, there was a big split. McCabe was complicated by the fact that Geoffrey Hill had applied for I think just a lectureship, and Rix was a great supporter of his, and he kept on saying, is this a faculty which will keep McCabe and reject Geoffrey Hill?
Well, was it an alternative? I mean, in other words, couldn't McCabe stay and Geoffrey Hill
Of course.
come as well?
Of course. But still, he said it's a malign conjunction. You turn away the greatest living poet, which I don't believe actually, but it's still another ground for discussion. And you keep the charlatan. So in fact, McCabe departed to glory, and Hill came, and still here actually.
And you left partly because of that, or?
I left. I really, it was getting me down, making me ill. So I was also 60, over 60 at the time. I can't remember exactly how much, and could go. And then I had an invitation to a chair at Columbia, and that seemed altogether more attractive. Why it seemed more attractive, I don't know. So in the end I thought, well, why don't I do that? I can go, I can stay at Columbia as long as I like, with no retiring age.
Yeah.
So I went, and
I enjoyed it.
I only stayed for 2 years. I realised then I didn't want to teach anymore. That was a real feeling. You get so strongly that you finish with teaching. I don't think you haven't had that.
Not quite, no. I'm just...
Probably weren't if you...
No, I'm enjoying it. But I slipped backwards through the tripos, which is an interesting thing I explained to my colleagues. They don't understand that they get out of touch and they're not able to teach right at the top of the... So I really enjoy first year teaching now, and second year to a certain extent. But the things I write about I'm a specialist on, but the broad sweep of the tripos, I know my younger scholars are teaching people who I haven't read and so on. So, but I enjoy the first year very much. So you were only 62 really when you effectively retired.
I suppose I was. Yes.
And you came back to Cambridge then.
I never really left Cambridge.
You kept your house.
Kept the house. I had remarried in 70, I think.
Did either of your wives play any part in your intellectual life? I mean, were they...
Well, my second wife was, in fact, a rather brilliant critic, literary critic, trained, with much admired in certain American circles, not well known here. She did some teaching here.
What was her name? Use her name.
Her name was Van Vactor.
You better spell that.
Sorry?
You better spell that.
V-A-N V-A-C-T-O-R. Anita Van Vactor. And she did some. She helped Tony Tanner with the American courses. And was a fiercely good teacher. I speak of her, she's dead, she's not dead. I don't know whether she's teaching anywhere or not. however, as you gather that work up too.
Yes,
So,
yes, I did. I was going to, well, there were several further last sort of questions, rounding up questions I'd like to ask you. I always ask people about their religious beliefs, affiliations, non-beliefs.
Well, Church of England choir boy. I think more as a part of social aspiration than anything else. Although my mother was as religious as a woman of her kind at that time would likely to be, I think. I didn't think my father was very religious. I think I am religious, but I haven't got a religion.
Well, a lot of your poetry, the poetry you like, obviously Milton, Wordsworth, Yeats and so on are religious poets.
Herbert is a great favourite.
Is he?
And well, that's true. And it's religious music, or a lot of religious music is bad, of course, but some of it is important to me.
So you go to chapel, or just for the music?
I can't even pretend to go often to chapel. I had to choose between the annual Matthew Passion in here or in London, and I chose London this time. I thought here is outside the chapel for a change. And of course that is a totally religious work.
So you're not angry at God. You're not a Dawkinsite.
Well, no, I don't think I'm very pleased with him, actually.
Beta minus. What about Hopkins? Amanda Hopkins, are you fond of him?
Frenetic, I think.
Yeah, isn't it? Many alliterations, but...
No, Herbert is my Anglican poet.
Is he? Yes, I love Herbert.
And Vaughan, of course, very beautiful poet. We haven't had any good religion, except perhaps we have to include Hopkins, I suppose. R.S. Thomas?
Yes, I love Thomas.
Hill? He's a religious poet.
The next question I want to ask you was this title of your autobiography, which you mentioned, Not Entitled. The one other literary critic I've interviewed at depth, George Steiner, asked, I said at the end, is there anything else I should ask you, George? And he said yes. Invidia, envy. I've lived my life on the edge of greatness. I've studied great people. I've been with great scientists. And yes, I know I'm just their servant. I'm just a literary critic. I am beta plus 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 plus. They are alpha. And this has been a sense of sadness and bitterness in my life. But is that what you meant by not entitled, or was it something?
No, I didn't mean that, really. I think that's a position reserved for George. I've heard that story many times.
Have you?
No, mine is, if you read my book, which is it sounds like I'm trying to induce you to do so.
I will.
I explain what the expression means in naval terms. And it's the sailors, or if they're not entitled to any pay, then they put their cap on the table, and normally their money is put on cap. But if they're not entitled to any, the writer says not entitled, and ME is inscribed in the ledger, and the sailor goes away saying he's had a northeaster, a northeaster. And this is really about the sense that the wind is against you which is very unreasonable in my case. I think I've been very lucky, but that's what it is, really. No, it's
So
not-
why did you, realizing that you're very lucky, which you have been in many ways, why do you have this sense of the wind being against you, apart from the war?
Well, apart from the war, that was 6 years of one's 20s, a big loss. You can hardly, well, it'd be worse to have them out of your team.
So it's really that.
It's really that. And I suppose with a reference which George couldn't make to poverty of my childhood, general constriction of interest as well as money. So it's, I think George goes on saying he keeps sort of banging his head on the door that leads into the first class. He might be saying quietly to himself that he's really there. It's a question simply of having a good vibe.
Well, I wondered whether it was institutional, in fact, in a literary critic. I mean, again, thinking of Yeats, the scholars, bald heads scratching out things. Well, would they know if their whatever came this way?
What would they say if they could tell us walk
This way, yes.
Well, he's talking about philologists. They're not the same as the I don't think we're going out to make extravagant claims for them, but it's an important trade, practiced at a very low and sometimes vulgar level, I think. But it's an honourable occupation.
Are there any, you mentioned I.A. Richards, are there any literary critics who you, in a sense, model yourself, or at least admire more than others?
I suppose Empson would be the one that I would have to say. That was a relationship of friction, really. Empson was important to me. I didn't like him, and he didn't like me. But we actually wrote together, and later I came to see what a very silly man he was, and after that I was able to use him. I think he affects the tone of what I write still, and even more he affects Rix's tone, strangely enough. Empson is the most powerful critical mind in our time. He was just a sort of horrible man, I think.
And that, realising that made it easier to use his work. Was that what you were saying?
What happened, one became habituated to his normal, insulting way of treating people. The fact that he was always slightly drunk is really what's behind all that, I think. And the fact that in his last years he suffered from discipleship, in that far too many of his writings were collected and published when they should have been seen that this was doing him a disservice. So I discount all that and go ahead. There are other people. Does Kenneth Burke mean anything to you?
Yes.
Of course it would. Yes. Well, there again, something of a crank, but good head on him, as they said. I'd have some effect from him. Some too from the much despised French theorists, from people like Derrida, who quite unjustly treated as a kind of madman around here.
Well, one of the many things we didn't have a chance to talk on was your revolutionising the course at the University College, bringing in French, Barthes and Derrida, Foucault and others, shocking the British in their complacency.
Yeah, well, that was a happy moment in my academic life, I think. When was at the seminar, which was what you're referring to.
Yes, that's right.
There was nothing extraordinary about it. It was just a regular graduate seminar, and it drifted in that direction, partly through people from Cambridge who came to it. Stephen Heath, do you know him?
Yes, yes.
Jonathan Culler.
Yes, he wrote on structuralism.
That's right, and his wife of the time, Veronica. Do you remember her? Veronica Forrest Thompson. Remarkable woman. Who took her own life. Anyway, they would come down, loaded with ideas and so on, and the whole thing grew and grew, and then occasionally we'd get some novelists to come and talk, and then he or she would come back with friends, so it became a quite big event, a rather exhausting one by the time we finished sort of planning it and so on. So that became quite famous, and at that time comment was benign. It seemed to be a proper thing to be doing, which indeed it was, I think. But now, then everything turned very, very nasty with the McCabe affair.
Is there anything, I notice it's almost your time for your lunch. Yeah. Is there anything that you'd have liked me to have asked you about that I've missed?
I think you've kindly asked most of the important questions.
Well, I've got one last one then.
Yeah.
This is Desert Island Disc stuff. Those great poets you've studied and written about and read, you can only take one to your desert island.
I see. Well, can it be Shakespeare?
Yes,
Well,
could be Shakespeare.
they give me Shakespeare and another one.
Yes, they do. Yeah. Okay. Well, you're given Shakespeare to make it more interesting, so you can, and the Bible.
Take the Bible. Well, I think terribly restricting to have only one. I probably Milton would be a candidate, I think. But I want the lot, all the prose.
He did write a great deal. And, I was brought up in Hawkshead, and so my youth was Wordsworth, endless Wordsworth, and I'm a great fan of his. But as with music, as soon as I think this is my favourite musician or poet, then I immediately think of all the other ones who are also my favourite.
That's right, I know the feeling.
So it's
well, I was a Wordsworth worshipper. But curious enough, I've never taught a course on Wordsworth. And now there's nobody in the faculty that can teach a course in Milton. But, I could, but they don't ask me.
How dreadful. Anyway, thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you.